Okay, let's get into it. Most of us carry, I think, a quiet way of grading ourselves, not out loud, internally. We look at our lives and think, I'm doing okay. I'm sure there are things I could improve, but compared to others, compared to them, I'm not doing that badly. We tend to measure our lives more by the sins that we don't commit. I haven't done that. I'm not like those people. Overall, I'm pretty decent. And if we're honest, that comparison kind of gives us some moral comfort. But James wants to step into that instinct here in James 2. But if you show partiality, you are committing sin and are convicted by the law as transgressors. For whoever keeps the whole law but fails in one point has become guilty of all of it. For he who said, "Do not commit adultery," also said, "Do not commit murder. If you have not committed adultery but do commit murder, you become a transgressor of the law." James is, once again, writing to believers. They're scattered. They've been kicked out of Jerusalem for their faith. In the previous verses, he's been addressing favoritism in the church, the way that wealthy people were treated with honor while the poor people were quietly kind of tucked in the side. And some have dismissed that as a relatively small issue. Um, it's not great, but not as a serious moral failure either, right? It's not murder or adultery. James here wants to widen our lens on sin. He reminds them that God's law isn't just a checklist, that we can succeed in most areas, right? As long as we get an 80% or something or 75, then we're good. And then we ignore the rest that feel less important. Um, but the law is a unified expression of God's character. All comes from the same lawgiver. And that's why James gives two examples, adultery and murder. Both come directly from the Ten Commandments. And his point, it's pretty simple. You can't claim obedience to God by keeping some of the commandments while at the same time ignoring others. Because when we break one, we're not just violating a rule, we're stepping outside of the authority of the one who gave it. And that's the weight of that phrase, guilty of it all. James isn't saying every sin carries identical consequences, but he's saying something deeper. The law, it isn't a pile of independent regulations. It's one coherent expression of God's will for us. And we break it in one place, and we cross the line of obedience. And Jesus presses the same idea on the Sermon on the Mount. He takes a command like murder and adultery, and he moves them beneath the surface into anger, contempt, and lust. Not to make people despair, but revealing that righteousness, it's not about just managing appearances, but it's about our heart being aligned with God. And that changes how we view ourselves. Instead of comparing our behavior to our high school friends, we begin to recognize that all of us need grace, um, not just the obviously broken, all of us. And it ends that comparison where I feel like I'm better. No, all of us need grace. And so when James confronts the favoritism here in chapter 2, he's doing more than correcting a social habit. He's reminding us, all believers, that sin doesn't become harmless just because it feels small. Every command matters because every command comes from the same God. And that realization, it does something healthy. It humbles us. It removes the illusion that we're fundamentally better than the people around us. And it quietly needs to pull us back to that dependence on God's grace. Wherever you find yourself, God goes with you today.